Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Jose.
I'm Mike.
And we're going to talk about Love, Simon, which I dragged Mike to.
You didn't have to drag me to it. I just thought from the trailer it didn't look that fun.
Yes, well, so I dragged you to it.
I had a good time.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what I wanted to know, actually. So what do you think?
Yeah, I had a good time. I think it's got its issues, but I think the issues are not with the filmmaking, they're more with certain things about representation. I think actually the storytelling is really good. I think the characterization is pretty good. The actors are very good. It made me a bit teary once or twice. I think it hits the right notes, and I like the relationship between the characters. I like the ending. It did the job in a way.
Well, I have mixed feelings about it, really, because I mean, I love teen movies and I love romantic comedies, and in a way, this is both. You know, the only thing that's different about it really is that it's gay, right? It's kind of, you know, the protagonist is this gay guy who's coming out and he's hiding it from his friends, and it's a very romantic story, and it's done in that vein, really. And I really very much wanted to like it, yeah, because it's kind of extraordinary to have, you know, a mainstream teen film / romantic comedy in which the protagonist is gay. And it's nice to see these kinds of films being done with a budget, right? So
yeah, I think $17 million.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's quite a budget for, you know, for what is really a kind of a gay film.
So the plot is, the premise at least, is there's this kid at school who's 17 years old, and he's gay, and that's no revelation. Like, he knows he's gay, but he's keeping it secret from everybody.
Yes.
He starts this anonymous email correspondence with someone else at the school who's done an anonymous blog saying that they're gay. So, and through this, they don't know who each other are, but they kind of fall in love with each other over this email correspondence. At the same time, he's contending with how is he going to come out, or is he going to come out even, to his friends and family. And there's also this other kid who kind of inveigles his way into his life, who starts to ruin things for him by blackmailing him. He finds out about these emails and blackmails him. That's the gist of the plot. And then from here on, I guess, spoilers.
Yes.
So it has a kind of... It feels like any sort of teen movie you'd care to mention, right? It's quite light. It's on the more indie sort of side, the feeling of it. Something more like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, was it? I think it was, yeah, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. It had that similar sort of feeling to it. But I mean, it's not sort of... That's not a particularly notable thing. Like, it's on that sort of area, as opposed to being like a gross out comedy or something like that.
Yes.
It's on the more sort of family friendly-ish sort of side.
Yes. I mean, what I liked about it really is that it feels supported by a budget. So it's slicker than any other film I've seen in this type before. It's got stars, you know, so Jennifer Garner and Josh Duhamel. Actually, Josh Duhamel, when I first saw him, I thought, who is that cute, you know, father? And then I realized, oh my God, it's Josh Duhamel, and he's great. So, you know, so it feels kind of, that feels like a kind of a support, you know, for what must have been a bit of a chance to make this type of film at this budget, really. And I think it works, though. I also think it's not particularly well done, actually. I mean, there were moments that, you know, I liked very much, and there were moments that also just made me squirm. And I thought kind of there were moments that were really off. Or actually, when you were saying, you know, the story's very well told, I actually think some things were a bit leaden and heavy-handed. I thought the whole blackmail thing, you know, for me didn't work, right?
Sure.
Like, you know, and I thought the character who played the blackmailer, the actor who played the blackmailer, to me really grated. Yeah, like it was slightly off-key.
Okay, I mean, I felt like he was annoying. But annoying. That was his character. Like, I think it felt like... I mean, there was even a certain point where there was one sort of point right at the start where you met him where I thought, oh God, he reminds me of me. at that age. Fucking hell. And not and it went away. It went away, but it was the whole thing about sort of the way in which his personality was grating and kind of just by its nature kept people away, and also the fact that he wore fucking t-shirts that people can read. I did that all the time when I was that age. Oh, disgusting. And I had long, greasy, horrible hair. So like, but then there were other parts to his character which, you know, did not sort of remind me of me. Thank God. Yes. I mean, the whole thing about blackmailing another kid. And being so desperate to try and seduce this other girl, that wasn't me.
No, I think that was all kind of horribly handled. I mean, I'm sure they could have come up with a different plot point, really, or done that plot point better. You know, you can't have a whole thing of, you can't have a blackmailer who's about to potentially ruin somebody else's life and then turn it into a light romantic comedy where he's courting a girl and being turned down and it's meant to be funny, because the whole horror of it, for me, overhangs all of the rest of those bits, really.
I didn't feel that, I've got to say. I didn't feel it had an issue with tone there. I thought, you know, there were lighter moments and there were darker moments, but you never... I don't think the film ever sort of tried to hide the fact that what this guy was doing was horrible. But it's also like the guy... the guy is not even quite aware of just how horrible he's being, because then when it all comes out and when he's ruined the chance with the girl, because it was never meant to be anyway, and then he reveals to everyone that Simon's gay, like that's when it hits him what a dick he was being and how horrible it is, up to a point at least. I think so that there's an element of sort of not knowing, like he's so lost in his own idea of what his life's going to be that he doesn't realise how awful he's being to somebody else until it becomes real.
I thought it was all pretty formulaic.
Yeah.
And not particularly inventively done. I feel nonetheless that it's kind of like a step forward. I can imagine, you know, gay tweens really reveling in it and it being a very meaningful film for them, because it's probably the kind of thing they never really expected to see. You always have, you know, the gay as the heroine's sidekick, or, you know, as the humorous character in the film, as part of a gang or something. But, you know, to make him so clearly the protagonist, and, you know, and to make him like, you know, the person who desires and whose desires you are made to understand, I think that's quite novel. I do feel, however, that kind of, you know, people who were complaining about, you know, how trite and so on, Call Me by Your Name will have conniptions at this, because it's just such basic filmmaking, really.
Well, there are a couple of things that you made me think about, though, which I want to pick up on. So the first is the idea of the audience, and I'm glad you mentioned Call Me by Your Name, because I was going to bring it up. So the idea that there's a whole kind of swathe of people who will this film is really for, and will be quite affected by it and will consider it kind of their movie. Yes. Do you think, I mean, in a way, I think the film is a lot more accessible, and that makes it valuable than Call Me by Your Name.
I agree. I mean, I think the film, to me, seems directly aimed at young gay boys and young girls. Yeah, that seems to me to be the core audience for this film. And that is a very different audience than the audience that, you know, I felt was addressed by Call Me by Your Name, which is really like an art house audience. Yeah. And the general one at that. I'm not sure there was a specific gay address in it. Or there is to a degree.
Well, I think Call Me by Your Name maybe doesn't have a specific address, but it will speak to people of different generations and different cultures in different ways.
It did.
So I mean, kind of you and the guys of your age who you've been friends with for a long time will have reacted to that film as sort of, I mean, it's set in the early 80s, right? So there's a kind of whole history that comes with early 80s, pre-AIDS.
That's right.
Sort of a much more homophobic society back then, which you brought to it, which someone younger would not have.
Yes. And actually, one of the things that I want to say, just while we're talking about this, so I have mixed feelings about Love, Simon. I mean, I kind of liked it, but I also feel, you know, that as a teen film, it's far from being the best, or, you know, even a particularly sparkling example of it. on the other hand, I'm very, very glad to see it, and I was very glad to see it. And I'm also very glad to see it in conjunction with all of the films that have come out this year that feel addressed in some way to a gay male audience. And I'm speaking here roughly about, things like Moonlight, not so far, what was the British film as well?
I don't know.
God's Own Country, which was marvelous. But also there was, the film about the miners, and early gay activists in support of the miners. It's now escaping me with the film.
Pride.
Pride.
That's about 2014, I think. But
okay, yeah. So Moonlight, Pride, God's Own Country, Beach Rats, Call Me by Your Name, and just a few days ago I saw 120 beats per minute, and I'm sure I'm missing things.
Blue is the Warmest Colour, addressed to a female audience.
That's right. Blue is the Warmest Colour, which was fantastic. So to have this whole spate of films in which none of them have to bear, what was called the burden of representation. If there's only like one film that comes out every 5 years, people get kind of mad at it because they expect it to represent everybody and everything. And but actually kind of what I think is so good about the spate of films released at this moment is that they don't have to bear that burden, that they can, they can be themselves and address only particular issues and be judged only in kind of what they try to be, right? So, because you have a tween film like this, and because you have an art film, and because you have a film that's kind of, the protagonists are black and gay, and so, like, not one single film has to cover everything.
Well, yeah, it allows gay culture to not have to be monolithic.
So I was very glad to see this as a mainstream, medium budget genre film with stars, very typical of its kind. So on the lower end of a budget, but it feels like a studio film, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. It's interesting that it is notable for its budget. People have been talking about the fact it cost $17 million, but weirdly, It doesn't strike me as a huge risk for a studio. It's not on. I don't think it is so expensive that it's unfeasible. And I think that it's addressed in a kind of inclusive and friendly enough way that I don't really see anyone taking a great deal of offence to it. Like in terms of a business risk, it doesn't strike me as one really.
Right. Well, we'll see. I mean, I expect it'll be successful because the crowd.
But it's already made twice its budget.
Has it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go.
I mean, it does. Like I say, although I think you can find flaws with it, and we'll get onto it, I guess. It strikes me as ultimately a nice kind of pleasant, intelligent enough, sensible sort of teen movie. Do you know what I mean? Like it's fun enough and funny enough.
It is
sensitive.
And like I said, I enjoyed it. Though I think there were moments where, I kind of just got irritated by things not being very well done. So, for example, the whole of the last scene where they're in the Ferris wheel or whatever it's called. I thought, like, this has the potential to be so great visually, if nothing else, right? Like, you've seen Ferris wheels used so evocative. Some came running, or, like, it has such visual potential, that scene. And it just kind of felt, like, so flat and dull and kind of false and,
Yeah, visually it was not a great treat. I mean, it wasn't unpleasant, but it just wasn't imaginative, really.
Yes.
Or that evocative. You're right.
One of the things that I love about teen films is, the way that they're using the phones and the texting and, some films like, what was the one with the girl who was in the Harry Potter films? There was one, I don't know it was called
the Coppola one.
No, The Secret of Being a Wallflower or something like that. I may be getting
Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Something. She was in one of those films where I was really struck by, how the texting was used visually so imaginatively, and it cut across space, and the narrative used the texting both visually and narratively in such interesting ways. That's not here, right? Like, the film's not.
No, this is very traditional. You show a shot of the screen with the text on it. But I didn't hate that. I just thought it wasn't kind of overdoing it.
No, I didn't hate it. In fact, I liked it, but it just wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't like special or sparky or anything, but I didn't mind that to be honest.
Okay.
I didn't feel like it was lacking.
Yes.
in that respect.
I thought what was interesting for me and unusual, and I could see that there's a policy behind it, is the casting, right? So, Nick Robinson is Simon, and I thought that was an interesting choice because he's not particularly handsome, and you don't get a sense of like a new star. Because
He's no Timothy Chalamet.
He's not a Timothy Chalamet,
But he's cute enough. Like I think he looks.
No, but I think actually that might have been a policy to cast someone who's quite good, but who's quite ordinary looking. So the quite ordinary everybody could be a gay person. Right?
Well, he certainly has to have that sort of. His character is unremarkable in school. No one really. He's got a group of friends, but he's not special, and he's not remarkable to anyone in particular. So
that's right.
That's sort of.
There's a remark made about him being eighth choice or eighth best,
right.
or so the sense of ordinariness of is I think part of the film's deliberate kind of message it's trying to get across, right? That he's just an ordinary person, right? And actually that's built into the film. You were Simon before and you're Simon now, right? Like it's just you can be more fully yourself, but you're ordinary. But I actually wish that the film had cast somebody with more star quality.
I mean that's what makes it. That's what puts it on that sort of like I say, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl sort of thing for me. Like that, the way in these films people are fairly ordinary, and that's part of the attraction. Really, like they're not kind of outstandingly beautiful or outstandingly sort of notable. It's really the attraction is, and the point of those films is these are kids like you or I used to be.
I know. Well, I mean, I just feel kind of obviously like a tension there because like Josh Duhamel, who's not a big star, or Jennifer Garner, who is also not a particularly big star, kind of they appear and they kind of make you feel like watching, just their very presence, right? And also, who's the high school principal?
Tony Hale.
I thought he was the vice principal. I thought he was wonderful, right? So there's just something about kind of those people that makes you feel like
there's a bit more charisma to them.
Yeah. So the lack of it in the central character is, I know it's policy, but it also feels like a slight lack.
No, I get that. It did feel appropriate there, and I don't feel he's not like a blank slate. I mean, he's got a character, and he's a good performer as well. Yes. So I think it's not a disaster. That
no, far from it.
I mean, I guess it's more like those secondary characters get to be characters because they have these smaller roles to fill. It's actually he's got more on his shoulders in a way.
It's true, but that would be an argument.
Particularly the vice principal who gets to be silly all over the shop, but you only see him like 4 times, and
and he makes the most of it, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I wanted to get onto, and this may be slightly related to it, the other thing that I wanted to get onto from what you said earlier, you spoke about how gay people used to be or would otherwise be the side characters, the comic relief, or some secondary role that would kind of inform or reflect on a main character who was straight. And obviously in this, the main character is gay, so that's a sort of a mark of progress. But there is a secondary gay character in this who's a kind of different kind of gay, if you like, who I wonder if you feel like he was not handled that well or not treated that well or was slightly marginalised. So it's this character who is black and quite effeminate. I don't know if there's a term for it.
Yeah, he's quite queeny.
Quite queeny, I guess. Okay, so quite effeminate, and there's this kind of comic scene where he comes out to all his girlfriends, and they're all like, they're trying to feign surprise, but they can't do it because it's been so obvious that he's gay. And you see him get bullied every now and again. There are these two kids who pick on him particularly, who are kind of jockey sort of types, who take the piss, and he sort of kind of like, he dismisses them and he whatever claps back or whatever the term is, sort of with some wit and sharpness of tongue. He tells them to fuck off basically, and you see your main character sort of in the background, kind of sort of hiding, slightly cringing maybe, but then also being kind of impressed that this other character is able to stand up and be openly gay. But I do feel like he's not a comic relief character. You don't kind of laugh at him because he's so flamboyant or anything like that. That's not it at all. But there's a point where the two of them are sat together. They've been called to the principal's office because they've had sort of coming together with the homophobes. And they're talking to each other. And I guess I wanted more from that conversation because there's a line where your main character says to the very flamboyant guy that it's so easy for you being gay. And the flamboyant guy responds, "Are you joking? Like, it's really, really hard." And I can't remember exactly.
And he tells a story about, how his mother lies about him and having girlfriends to his grandparents when they go visit on Sunday, and so on and so forth.
So I understood the point of that scene, which was to show there's a kind of different kind of experience, or that life isn't what you think, and that the main character's been kind of so sort of caught up in himself that he doesn't realise that it can be difficult for somebody else. But it felt disingenuous to me somehow.
Actually, I think you're getting at something. I've only just realised from what you're saying. But I think what you're pointing to, which I agree, is that actually the film is setting up a hierarchy of gayness, right? So the function of that black queeny character is to shore up the normality of the central character.
Yes.
And in doing so, it's creating a hierarchy. So, kind of, you could be gay and normal and be like Simon, and that's so much better than being like a queeny black gay kid who gets bullied and is made fun of. And like it does set. You're right.
Well, what strikes me about it, thinking about it, is it sort of seems kind of brave or whatever to do this kind of teen movie about kind of realizing who you are or coming of age. But with a gay guy. But then actually you kind of... I think that... And maybe Call Me By Your Name was a similar sort of thing where, again, the gay guys are quote-unquote normal. Like, they're not flamboyant. They're not kind of obviously gay to the outside world. And I think you're meant to sort of think, that homosexuality... There's such a stereotype of flamboyance around homosexuality that you kind of don't realise that gay people cannot be flamboyant and can just be like anybody else. But actually, wouldn't it be much braver to do a film like this where your main character is really different, like visually and kind of behaviourally different?
I think you're right. And actually, the film wants to have it both ways because, of course, the thing is that Simon is in love with this guy who he doesn't know what he looks like, and he thinks it could be several people. And at the end... that person is revealed, as this mixed race guy who's Jewish and gay. So, he's black, Jewish, and gay. Yeah. And so, and that is the object of desire. Except you haven't seen him be the object of desire, really. That whole plot point is shot as a revelation, right? Like, who that blue is could have been one of a number of people, including him, until the film cheats and makes you think that it's not the guy who it turns out to be.
Yeah, he suspects him at first, and then he sees him at a party drunk in a bedroom with a girl. And you think, okay, it's not him then, but it turns out later that was just a drunken thing and it was him.
So let me just clarify. So the film, I think, does set up a hierarchy, actually. Though, it's kind of very gentle, and it kind of is trying to show a diverse way of being gay. Nonetheless, it's all about kind of normalizing it, right? I mean, you do wonder what kind of RuPaul, would have done in a film like this. It's almost like there's no place for a RuPaul or someone who even likes RuPaul in this film, which is a shortcoming in the film. So I think, the range of representation, the film tries to show a range of representation and tries to be sympathetic to all of it. But nonetheless, the effect is of a hierarchy in which the white middle class, straight acting in quotation marks boy is, the ideal, really. Then I also don't like the way that the film cheats you. Yeah, that kind of, it takes you through all of these possible people of who it could be. and then it cheats on the narrative. I didn't like that. So I didn't like that aspect of cheating. I didn't like the final set piece. And the other thing that I didn't like is once he's outed, all his friends get angry at him and drop him. And I didn't like the way that was handled either,
No, because the reason that they drop him is because so he's been blackmailed by this guy who has the screenshots of his email conversations. He wants to keep that secret, so he says, "Okay, what do you want?" And the guy says, "I want you to help me get with this girl." And in order to do that, the main character has to sort of fuck with his friends' relationships in order to engineer it so that this guy can kind of get in. Once it's all revealed that that's what was happening, they feel very betrayed.
Yes.
Which I think is fair enough up to a point. But then there is this kind of... He does try and explain, this is what was happening to me.
Yes.
It gets very difficult.
It gets very difficult, and I wish it would have gotten more difficult and a bit messier. But I also think that the film doesn't take an opportunity to make a point with that. Because, the thing is, kind of, the kid is being blamed personally for something that is acted on him socially. If the closet didn't exist, if there was no homophobia, these situations wouldn't arise. So actually the friends are blaming him for something that he's really victim to. And I think the film could have done much more complex things and interesting things.
That's true, actually. That's a really good point. I mean, it's very clean, the way that they kind of feel betrayed by him and then sort of forgive him and work out their relationships. But it that all happens pretty much behind the scenes. It's very clean on the surface, and actually there's real meat underneath that. What you say about him being victimised for something that he's already a victim of, being blamed for something he's already a victim of, is a really interesting idea.
Yes.
And actually it's something that the film could make something of. It doesn't, though.
But it doesn't. I mean, the film has a few good lines. I love the drama teacher. I loved the principal or the vice principal. It's got a few good jokes around it. And I did love aspects of the characters of Jennifer Garner as the mother and Josh Duhamel as the father. Though there were also moments that I found I both loved them and they were cringy, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
In what way were they cringy to you?
Well, I just kind of don't think they were very well done. So the thing about the Josh Duhamel character, I loved the concept of him. Yeah, that he was, that he actually was.
He's a bit of a softie.
He's a softie. He's over emotional. He loves his kids and lets them know, and he's almost like too much. Yeah. So, and that could have been such a wonderful comic premise.
But on the outside, he builds himself as more kind of rugged, and he's always making crude jokes to his son.
Yeah.
About who you've been masturbating and looking at girls' pictures and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, trying to be, trying to forge a friendship with the son and trying to make him feel that he can talk to his father about those things. So obviously, it's having the opposite effect. I just think there were much more comic possibilities in that.
Sure.
And that actually. I found aspects of it cringy, really.
There were three particular moments to me where the kid chooses to come out as gay. So he comes out as gay to his new friend, because she's been at school for 3.5 months. So he comes out to her in a car, and then later on he says to one of his oldest friends, he says, "The reason I could come out to her and not you was because I didn't know her very much."
That's right.
Which actually, that spoke to me, because I remember a friend of mine from school who came out as gay to us not long before we left school, for a couple of months before we left school. And I think some of us had kind of suspected it. Certainly no one was particularly surprised, and no one cared. But and then he sort of went off to university and sort of embraced a very different kind of lifestyle that he hadn't at school, which to some of us, I think, felt... betrayal is a strong word, but it felt like he'd sort of left us. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then, kind of looking at it from that other perspective, I guess what this moment in the film made me think of was that, well, no, the fact that something is new means that you get to embrace this different part of yourself and present yourself slightly differently, sort of discover who you are slightly differently. I kind of get why he never did that at school with us.
Yes, and also I think, those things are fraught because, the risk, and the fear is that of rejection. So obviously the people who you love most are the people who it's harder to talk about, because there's a greater risk in a way. So that aspect of the order of who he comes out to.
Yeah. And when he talks to his oldest friend, and they kind of, this is after he's been publicly outed, and they're kind of reconnecting. And this is when she says, "Why couldn't you ever tell me? Because I've known you for such a long time, it would change everything." But then she says, "Tell me about this boy you're in love with."
Yes.
And to help me kill the old you.
Yes.
And he says, "Well, you don't have to kill him." And he's like, "I'm cutting you up with a mental machete." Which is a really nice, like, it's obviously incredibly violent, but it's a sort of really nice, sweet way of saying, like, I want to know who you are.
Yes.
By killing the old version, but I want to know you. You know?
So the film tries to have it both ways, because on the one hand, it's saying essentially you're the same, really. So what is this thing about killing the old you? I mean, I am the old me, except there's this other aspect, that I'm letting you in, so I also, I like that moment.
It's an exaggerate. It's a joke. It's exaggerated, and it's the way that it felt very authentic to me. It felt like the way that friends talk to each other.
You see, the thing, to me, nothing in the film felt authentic, actually, and I suppose that's my problem. I think it's kind of like a glamorous wish. My view of romantic comedies at the moment is, that except for some, like Frances Ha and things like that, but the mainstream one. I remember saying this about. There was a Ryan Gosling film, I forget what it was called. It was a big hit where he shows his abs, I forget what it's called. Crazy Stupid Love, right? In which, I think, to me it illustrated all that was wrong about American romantic comedy at the moment. And it was that the filmmakers, the director didn't believe it, the writers didn't believe it, the actors didn't believe it, and the audience didn't believe it. And we're all participating in this kind of, hyper-real thing where, things are meant to mean something, but actually we all know that they don't, and nonetheless, kind of, we react as we're supposed to react, even if we don't really want to react that way. So, kind of, if you see, like, Lubitsch or Shop Around the Corner, like, everything is funny, but actually you also feel a sense of people feeling love and pain and getting the wrong thing and misunderstanding, and there seems something at stake in it. Whereas actually in these films, it's like in a bubble of disbelief. It's almost like projects engaged in bad faith, really. Now, Love, Simon comes out of a very good place. I'm sure it's it's significant to the filmmakers and the people involved and so on. But actually, in terms of how coming out is, how being a teenager is, how coming out in high school is, how your first romance is, how, this is all, kind of, at best it's wish fulfillment, and at worst it's just bad faith, really. Like, no, it's not like that. It's nobody's experience. It's like, it might be the way that you wanted it to be, but it's not. But so it does have that kind of glamorous, should have been, wish it could have been,
It does feel more like wish fulfillment to me than bad faith. I mean, in a way, it feels related to what we said about Call Me By Your Name, where we said the thing about this is it's a fantasy, where people particularly talked about the father character in that film being so forward-looking, like unrealistically so. Yeah. And actually, like this is a kind of, although there's a melancholy ending to that film. There's an element of fantasy here where kind of things are better than they might realistically have been.
It might have been, but I get a sense that the writer, believed in what he was presenting. Yes. Okay. Whereas kind of, I think this feels a lot more artificial, a lot more by numbers.
Sure. Oh yeah, that's for sure.
So now that said. I had an enjoyable time, and I'm glad it exists.
I did like the other two sort of coming out moments I wanted to talk about were with the parents, which are sort of brief moments really, and the kid has already been outed as gay, so the parents know, and this is actually just when he speaks to them about it really for the first time, but and actually kind of acknowledges it and has a conversation with them. He speaks to his mum and his dad separately. And those are two moments that I really, really loved. I felt like they were sensitive, and they were brief, but they kind of, particularly the one with the dad. The mum you kind of expect. I mean, he's already talked about how his mum is as liberal as you can get, and you kind of know that she's just going to be totally fine. And that's how their conversation goes.
I welled up a little bit at her speech, though.
Yes.
As
No, so did I. But the dad especially, because
Yes.
he falls to pieces, and he says to the kid, "I love you, and I want you to know that I'm really proud of you." But he can't control sort of how much he's just falling apart emotionally. Which I thought was just beautiful and really funny as well. And actually, he's falling apart at that point, and the kid isn't. I kind of wished at some points that the kid cried more at those moments. But at that one in particular, I thought it felt it's handled. I think it's made to be a really funny little moments where the kids sort of. It's the dad who, like I say, he's kind of breaking down, and the kid is sort of going, "Okay, chill out, Dad."
I do feel that since they didn't cast a star, that they should have cast a little bit of a better actor. Because I mean, to be fair, I think is it Nick Robinson?
Nick Robinson, the kid's name.
Yeah. He's quite good with a line. He's able to get laughs, through some of his line readings. But I would have liked more from him. I mean, there were moments where you wanted greater depth of feeling from him, or contradictory feeling, or like those conversations with the father. Or he's so stoic and almost like blank, really. Where I think nobody's that cool. And actually, there were qualities in the scene that could have been brought out just with a wider range of expression.
Yeah, he's not complex enough. I mean, that's probably. I think that he's good at portraying emotions, but like only one at a time.
Yes.
Which is kind of what the film requires in a way. It's not as complex as an artier film would be. It is more mainstream, but I know what you mean. It also struck me that the whole film has a real air of sort of upper middle class privilege. I mean, like the size of this kid's room is astonishingly big, and I mean, you see a shot of his house. It's a fucking mansion. This kid lives in, and this is it's like, what is it? I guess it's like a New England sort of.
Man, that's a trope in American romantic comedy, right?
Certainly
Like,
is.
it's kind of the average home is like. Buckingham Palace.
But this is the first one where it really struck me and really made me think, like, fucking hell, how is it actually like this in America? Because if you shot this film, like, there could be an equivalent of this story being told in the UK. Houses would not look like this.
Well, but I mean, let's say there are differences in the size of houses in America and in Britain for obvious reasons. But that's still,
it's a lifestyle.
Yeah. And obviously it's meant to be like upper middle class. It's his birthday, he gets a car. Yeah.
Not a brand new car, to be fair. It's a slightly tatty thing, but it's a car nonetheless.
It's two professional parents, and, he's got his own car, and he drives his friends, and, so I think it is, it is meant to be a very privileged upbringing. And also the high school that they're going to, and the policies in the high school is meant to be very liberal, and and so on. So I think that's there in the film.
But a lot of films are like that.
Yeah,
it's a kind of film.
See it as a problem.
I suppose it's the kind of setting that means you can focus on one thing as like the problem. Like if you're poor as well, if the character's poor or something like that, then there's like another kind of set of problems in his life to contend with. Which would be perfectly legitimate story to tell, but it's just like to keep it simple in a film like this.
It would be a different. I mean, I'm glad that you pointed it out, because it's true. That is what it is, But I don't have any particular.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. It's just saying that I picked up on. I guess.
So final verdict.
Although we've mostly picked out flaws with the film.
Yes.
I nonetheless really enjoyed it.
Really. Yes. Okay.
And like I say, it kind of it worked on me when it wanted to. It made me a little weepy at some points, and the question of authenticity we can disagree on. I mean, it felt ultimately like it had a good heart, and everything was aiming sort of in the right direction, even if
I agree with.
Slightly failed here and there.
Yeah, no, I think about the aim and the good heart, I agree with. The execution, I have, I think it's not very well done.
But
however,
it is also very mainstream, and you've got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's very mainstream. And actually, I suppose my own final feeling is that it's a film that's not aimed at me. It really is aimed at, gay teenagers and young girls, and I almost have no doubt that they will love this and that it will be a meaningful film for them.
I think so. In some ways, it's rather like A Wrinkle in Time, which we saw the other day, which we said about that, or I said about that at least. Like, isn't it good that young people of colour have a rubbish fantasy film of their own?
Yes.
And this is not rubbish. This is better. But nonetheless, it has that kind of feeling of like, isn't it nice that gay kids have a similar film of their own?
Yeah, no, that's true. In that respect, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
we're on Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies. We're on Facebook. We've got a website, eavesdroppingatmovies.com, which is just all the episodes. Obviously, we're on iTunes and SoundCloud. And you can like email us, eavesdroppingatmovies@gmail.com. I think we never get emails, but you could be the first.
I mean, what's happening is that we get kind of like private emails saying, "Oh, I really like this," or "I really like that." Whereas actually, I suppose one of the things that we look forward to and we would like to have is kind of like a public discussion on these films. So do comment on any of these venues if there's something that you want to say or you'd like to have a conversation with us about.
Yeah. Did you feel it lacked someone eating cum out of a fruit? Bear in mind it's a 12A.
No, like, and maybe I should have talked a little bit about this because
Okay,
the thing
you can
is,
if you want, we're still recording.
well, I love teen films. I love 10 Things That I Hate About You and Cruel Intentions and so on, and I think they're funny and they're glamorous and they're sophisticated, right? And they're much better than this.
Sure.
Right? So, and yet they're all within that vein, like, that kind of budget, people who are about to be stars but are not quite yet, or people who were once stars but, are no longer quite shining as much, right? These are the films where people like Reese Witherspoon and Heath Ledger made their start and so on, right? So, but I love those films. I just think this one, it wasn't as complex enough and it wasn't as witty enough, really. I think there were dimensions to the story that were not dramatized and filmed properly. Like, could have been better.
Yeah, I think that there's a possibility it will go down as some people's favourite film, but that'll be because of the representation as opposed to the actual quality of the filmmaking and storytelling.
Right. That's right. Or even what it does with genre,
Yeah.
It's not the best example of its genre. Though if you look at it as a gay coming out teen film, I can't really think of another, so this has to be the best.